Okay, so today we'll be discussing about abdominal cavity and peritoneum. It's a very simple topic. So starting by the headings, where we have first the abdominal cavity and then we have the peritoneum. We'll be studying only the important aspects of this chapter which is required because it's a quite complicated chapter. So let's stick to what is important. Abdominal cavity, it's very simple. It's just a cavity in the body, and it's one of the largest cavities. Since it's the largest, it also has the largest serous sac. And we have peritoneum, which is basically like the inner lining. I think that's the easiest definition I can give of peritoneum as of now, which is basically the linings, and it's basically inner lining of the organs and the abdominal wall. Like for example, anatomically, peritoneum is of two types, where we have parietal peritoneum and then we have visceral peritoneum. This is basically everything that's required as of now, nothing really serious. So just to get a very brief idea about what's peritoneum and all of that, it's basically peritoneum is more of like an thin serous membrane. It's double layered, important, and you have to remember. So it has two layers. One is the visceral one and the other one is parietal. So the visceral one is the one which is attached to the organs, which is also known as viscera, and the parietal one is the one which is attached to the body walls and all of that. So the outer layer is more of like fibroelastic. This one is like fibroelastic, kind of strong, and helps in maintaining more of the strength aspect. Whereas the inner one, it's just squamous epithelium, simple squamous epithelium. That's it, nothing more, nothing less. One thing to be remembered, that there's an exception. First thing, visceral peritoneum is normally simple squamous. Okay, visceral peritoneum is normally simple squamous, but we have an exception, which is basically in the females. So in females, basically for their ovaries, here their visceral peritoneum is not of squamous epithelium, but here it's basically cuboidal. So it is cuboidal epithelium, and they don't basically have the mesothelium. Fine. So as of now, till now, we have basically discussed about what is peritoneum, and it's two layers, and it's basically like the interior of the abdominopelvic cavity, which basically covers all of them. And since there are two layers, the space present between these two layers will be known as peritoneal cavity, and it has a thin capillary film of fluid. So it has some amount of fluid and all of that, and this fluid helps in lubrication between these two layers of the cavity. Therefore it allows mobile parts of the intra-abdominal digestive tube, so it helps in good movement. And this is basically all about the peritoneum in rough. Now to actually imagine how peritoneum exists in the human body, we'll go with a very rough diagram. Okay, so we'll take, I think, approximately a sagittal section to see how the peritoneum is actually attached. So if we take this to be our anterior abdominal wall, posterior abdominal wall, we'll take this to be our rough diaphragm. Wait, let's give a color for diaphragm, something brown. Let's make it a little fatter. So this is our diaphragm. Fine. So we have our diaphragm, we have our anterior abdominal wall, we have a posterior abdominal wall. This would roughly be our liver placement over here. This will be our liver. And then we have our stomach somewhere over here. Then we would have our I think it's too long to write transverse colon, so we'll just write T colon. And then we have pancreas somewhere over here. Let's make a better diagram, something like this. So we have pancreas, something like this. And then we have our small intestine somewhere over here. This is a very rough diagram just to get the understanding of what actually peritoneum is and what we are going to study in this chapter. Okay, and below this we'll have our urinary bladder. This is a very hot diagram. This would be a vagina, and this would basically be a uterus. This whole part to be rectum. Now basically the peritoneum, it starts, first thing, it's attached to the anterior abdominal wall, and then it moves through all the viscera neatly like this, covers them till whatever extent it can. Let's put this uterus thing aside for it now. It's beautifully goes back into the abdominal wall, comes like this, attached beautifully like this. To whichever extent the peritoneum can actually cover, it would cover. And here we go till here. So this is the so whichever peritoneum is there near to towards the body wall of that will be our parietal peritoneum, and the peritoneum that lines all the organs, that will be a visceral peritoneum, and this whole thing that's formed will be simply known as our greater sac. Okay, and here, which is basically below the stomach, means in front of the stomach it's all about greater sac, and behind the stomach, whatever space is left, it will form our lesser sac. And apparently there's this area in the liver which is not covered by the peritoneum. So this area is known as our bare area of liver. So it has no peritoneal coverings, and apparently that area, like the bare area of liver, has some clinical significance. Maybe we will look into this. Now basically the peritoneum is formed all over, and it's also known our abdominal organs, or like our peritoneum, they say it is basically our abdominal viscera. They're known as intra-abdominal but they are extraperitoneal. So first thing, they are within the abdominal cavity, so that makes complete sense. Whereas extraperitoneal means they are outside of the peritoneum. It's simple. It's not like within the peritoneum, because the peritoneum is just forming their upper layer, nothing more and nothing less. So it makes sense, right? Extraperitoneal. They're not within the peritoneum. They're just it's more of like, for example, you have a balloon and someone like tries to insert something through the space, like something is being inserted, so it'd be something like this, you know? So yeah, so whichever part is lining this part, this will be the visceral peritoneum and the outside one would be parietal peritoneum. No wonder it's called as extraperitoneal layer. Now this peritoneum, depending on its location, has different names. Alright, so we'll have to learn about this is the basic rough structure. We have the greater sac, we have the lesser sac and all of that. Now what we'll be doing is knowing what are the other important things that's actually present over here. Okay, names are given for each and everything. So first thing we have right now is our folding over here, okay, between the stomach and transverse colon. Actually, it doesn't occur this way. It actually occurs in such a way that first thing, there's this deep folding inside of the parietal peritoneum, and then the same for the other peritoneum. So this whole thing over here is known as our greater omentum. So it's basically made out of 4 layers. Okay, this thing is to roughly be remembered. Okay, and then whatever is included into it, into greater omentum, is basically our lesser sac. So first thing, we know what's greater omentum. Okay, now we have the thing which is basically acts as a communication channel between lesser sac and greater sac. So here we have something which is known as our epiproic foramen. It's also known as foramen of Winslow. And then we have this peritoneum present between the pancreas and transverse colon, which is known as our transverse mesocolon. Transverse mesocolon. Now the thing which is connecting our small intestine and the peritoneum associated to this is known as a mesentery, and it's the largest one out of all. This is to be remembered. And then we have the urinary bladder, uterus, this is the uterus part, and then we have rectum. So here there's this pouch formation between the uterus and rectum, so it's known as our recto-uterine pouch. So it's also known as pouch of Douglas. Again, an important topic and a topic of interest for us. And then after that we have here also a pouch. I think it's known as vesico-uterine pouch or something. I'm not going to the depth of it. And after that we have our lesser omentum also, which is basically present between the liver and stomach. So somewhere around here only we have our lesser omentum as well. So this is basically a rough idea. So basically in this whole chapter we'll be studying about peritoneum only, but it takes different modifications near different organs, therefore under different headings. Basically that's all about peritoneum, and we'll be also learning about the 9 regions of abdomen, the quadrant system, and how is the pain being referred. All of this we'll be looking into the retroperitoneal organs once, and about the process of zygosis once. We can look into it, and we'll come to the main topic. So as of now, as far as what the examination as far as exams are concerned, for university exams we basically have 6 topics of interest. Okay, so first we have to be discussing about a greater momentum, then we have to discuss about lesser momentum, then we will be discussing about the Morrison's pouch, which is also known as our hepatorenal pouch. Okay, then we'll have to discuss about lesser sac, which is known as our omental bursa. Followed by that, we'll have to do our epiploic foramen, very very important. And last but not the least, we have the recto-uterine pouch. This is also known as the pouch of Douglas. So these are the rough 6 topics we have to pay our attention over, along with the clinicals needed for it. So first we'll be covering the main topics, these 6 topics. Then we'll be discussing all the clinicals that are required for this chapter, and if there's any associated clinical of the chapter, then and there we'll be discussing it. Like if there's anything associated to any these 6 parts specifically, we'll discuss it then and there. Okay, so first we'll be discussing about a greater momentum. Okay, so we'll start off with a diagram which would make things damn easier. So we'll draw stomach. I think we can go for a light pinkish orangish color for it. Fine. Beautiful stomach. I think the lesser curvature of the stomach should be a little more curvy. Okay. This is the greater curvature of the stomach. And then, so this whole area is stomach. And then we'll go for the diaphragm. Okay. I think we have to just elongate the stomach a little bit here. Good elongation. Then we'll go for our diaphragm. So here comes our diaphragm. Fine. This is our diaphragm. Just giving it a rough marking. Yeah, this is thick enough. And then we have our organ, which is spleen, somewhere over here. Okay, I don't know, it's very roughly presented. So what spleen has to be doing here? So spleen is retroperitoneal. It's not in the ventral part. It's only in the dorsal aspect. So we have even drawn spleen right now. Very rough idea of how spleen looks. And then we have our peritoneums that are of interest right now. Not peritoneums, basically the ligamental thing, which is important. So yes. Okay. Basically have this ligamentum folding that comes off like this. Fine. We have the same thing over here. Wait. So here also we have a ligament formation, and after that we have our great sac that comes down. Okay, so basically and then we have some spots over here apparently. This so if we come to the labeling right now, which would make half of the things easier. So first we would have is the diaphragm. Okay, so this is the diaphragm, this is spleen. Okay, this is the whole stomach, this is the duodenum part. This whole great thing you see over here is our greater omentum. Okay, the yellow thing you see over here is fat, and whatever you see over here, this is known as our milky spots. These are our milky spots, which is basically dense patches of macrophages. So this is the whole greater omentum. And then we have the diaphragm here, we have the spleen, and actually this above part over here, it's our lesser omentum, a part of our lesser omentum, which is made up of two ligaments actually. So here we have the stomach, and here there's the position of liver. So it's actually the hepatogastric ligament. And then after that here we have the liver and the duodenum. So it is hepatoduodenal ligament. So we have the hepatogastric ligament and hepatoduodenal ligament, which makes our lesser omentum. Near the lesser curvature of stomach, we have duodenum, diaphragm, spleen, and here also. Here we have a ligament which is present between the stomach and the diaphragm. So it's known as gastrophrenic ligament. And here we have a ligament present between the stomach and the spleen. So it is gastrosplenic ligament. Gastrosplenic ligament. Alright. And here we have the greater omentum with the fat and the milky spots, which are basically the dense patches of macrophages. Alright. So this is basically the diagram of greater omentum. So what is greater omentum? First thing, it's the large thick fold of obviously the peritoneum, of our peritoneum here. Second of all, it is it's very obvious if this is the lesser curvature of stomach, lesser curvature and greater curvature. The greater omentum, it hangs from the greater curvature and the adjacent part of duodenum. So it basically hangs from the greater curvature of stomach and our adjacent part of the duodenum. Okay, simple. Adjacent part of duodenum and a greater curvature of stomach. And this whole thing covers the loops of intestine to some extent. It's variable though, but roughly it would cover. Okay, the other most important thing is it's made out of 4 layers. Okay, It's made out of 4 layers which fuse together to form a thin fenestrated membrane. This forms a thin fenestrated membrane which has some fat which is variable amount of fat, and yeah, basically a thin fenestrated membrane with variable amount of fat. Okay, so if we would be talking about the attachments of this thing, of our greater omentum, so if we would talk about the attachments of greater omentum, first we have the greater curvature of stomach. Okay, and then basically, here, this is where the anterior two layers start off, and then these fold on itself, which forms the posterior two layers. And this folding is such that, see, it's basically like this, and it folds into this. So if this is the first and the second layer, the first layer would become the third layer, and sorry, the second layer would become the third layer, and the first layer would become the fourth layer. Okay, and this posterior thing would ascend up to the transverse mesocolon. You can even refer to the main diagram over here. It starts from the stomach's greater curvature, and we have the anterior two layers of the peritoneum which would fold to form the posterior two, such that there's a whole 4-layer formation where the first layer would become the fourth layer, the second layer would become the third layer, and this would extend up to transverse mesocolon. Okay, so roughly this part is enough, you don't need to go to the depth. Okay, we have the whole stomach diagram, and we have the attachments, which starts from the greater curvature of stomach, folds into itself, forming the posterior two layers, and then it goes into the transverse mesocolon. It gets attached over there. It would ascend up till transverse mesocolon. Okay, so this is all about greater omentum. Now finally we'll have to discuss about the contents of greater omentum and the functions of it as well. So now we'll be discussing about the contents of greater omentum, right? So for this we have a trick. Boys, fatty boys, love pizza. Okay, so I think we can just get this better. Handwriting. Fatty boys love pizza. So the first content which we are going to get is fat, which is adipose tissue. Okay, which is very variable according to their nutritional status. And then from P we have the blood vessels that are associated. So we have the right and left gastric, gastroepiploic, so we have the gastroepiploic vessels, which basically run between the greater omentum's anterior layer and posterior layer near to the greater curvature of the stomach. And then we have L, which is basically for lymphatics and immunity in general, immune cells in general. And then for P we have peritoneum. So here we have peritoneal macrophages. Okay, peritoneal macrophages over here. So this is the one which forms the milky spots, the dense patches of macrophages. Okay, so this is all about the content of our great omentum. We have fatty boys love pizza. F for fat, B for blood vessels, where we have the right and left gastroepiploic vessels, which run between the anterior and posterior layers of the greater omentum near the greater curvature of stomach. L for lymphatics, related to the immune cells, and P for peritoneal macrophages, which is also related to the immunity. Now we'll be talking about the functions. Okay, so in functions, it's very simple. First we have storage, or you can even take it as the storehouse of fat. Second thing, it has a lot of macrophages, right, in form of dense milky patches. So due to the larger number of macrophages, it also protects the peritoneal cavity from infection. First is fat storage and second is protection from the infections. Third thing is it limits the spread of infection. Now this is very important, and due to this it's also known as the policeman of abdomen. Okay, it's a term given to it. It is very important. So policeman of abdomen is basically the greater omentum. This is for two reasons. Number one, whenever there is an infection, or site of site of infection, it moves to it. This is a quite mobile, right? A greater omentum is mobile, so it moves into the site of infection. Therefore it would seal it off from others. Therefore there won't be further spread of this infection. The second thing is, if there is any perforation of the gut, so if the gut is perforated, here similarly the greater omentum would move and plug into the gap created. So this would basically prevent any leakage. There won't be any leakage happening, and no leakage into the gut. That's why it's known as the policeman. First thing, if there's any site of infection, it will move into that area and seal it off from the other areas. Therefore it basically stops the spread. And if there is any perforation or leakage from the gut, it would go and plug into the gap to prevent the leakage. Okay, and since this is a large simple mesothelium tissue with fat, it is also used as a graft by surgeons, basically grafting material. And it normally protects the abdominal viscera from a blow on the anterior abdominal wall. So if this is our anterior abdominal wall, these are our abdominal viscera. Okay, and the covering that we have in between is our greater omentum. So if there is any blow or force applied on the anterior abdominal wall, the abdominal viscera is basically protected by our greater omentum. And it's also mentioned that this acts as a partition between the supracolic and the infracolic apartments of the greater sac. Supracolic and infracolic of the greater sac, and the thing that divides it is our greater omentum. Okay, so in functions, first we have the storehouse, which is the storehouse of fat. Second one, it protects our peritoneal cavity because of the large number of macrophages present in form of milky spots, which are dense patches of macrophages. And then we have the policeman of abdomen, which is our stomach, because it limits the spread of infection by sealing it off from other areas, or if there's any perforation, it would go plug into it. And it's also used as grafting material. it helps in protecting the abdominal viscera if there's any blow on the anterior abdominal wall, and it also acts as a partition between the supracholic and infracholic compartments of the greater sac. Okay, so we have read about the functions, the contents of greater omentum, how the attachments in general, and we have even seen a diagram which is associated to our greater omentum. We'll just see one diagram which shows us the development of greater omentum, like the stages of development of greater omentum, which would give us a very brief idea of how this greater omentum is formed and how it has 4 layers and all of that. Okay, so roughly we'll make our liver. To start off everything, so first we'll have is our liver, then we'll have our stomach, which would be actually inferior somewhere over here. This would be our stomach, and then after that we have pancreas here somewhere. This would be our pancreas, and we have our duodenum, very important. Our duodenum over here. And somewhere over here we'll have our not really that horrible though, like our transverse colon, and then somewhere over here I think we can take another color for transverse colon. Okay, basically over here it would come, and somewhere over here we would have our transverse colon, and then we have our transverse colon, and then we have our jejunum. Okay, so we'll be drawing all the viscera right now in a very good color. So here we have the stomach, all that, and 1 minute. All of that would just cover here, all of this. Transverse colon actually used to be somewhere else. You have to draw the lesser sac mainly. So this whole area that was present over here nicely was our lesser sac. Nicely here and all of this. This is basically our lesser sac. So now what basically happened is this whole boundary, duodenum nicely over here, then we have transverse mesocolon, and jejunum, and all of this would join later basically. Okay, so now what basically happens is, this is the rough layout. Now as this lesser sac keeps protruding into this area, it would basically form in such a way that, this is fine, lesser sac is fine, it would just protrude in such a way like this. It would take the transverse colon as well, cover this part, the pancreas, come all the way here, form the mesenterium, and come back here. Okay, so this is the rough development diagram. So here we have the 4 layers. Okay, 2 anterior and 2 posterior. These are the layers of our greater omentum. And then here we have the mesentery. This is the lesser sac. This is the stomach, pancreas, duodenum, lesser sac, which would protrude into the greater omentum. This whole area right now is greater omentum. Okay. So this is all about omentum. We have discussed the development. We have shown how the four layers are formed. We have discussed about all the functions that are present, the content of the greater and greater omentum, its attachments, and how it's basically formed. It's like a large thick fold hangs from the greater surface and all of this. So this is all that is required about greater omentum as of now. After this, we will be discussing about our lesser omentum. Okay, coming back, we will be discussing right now about lesser omentum. Okay, so this is basically present between the lesser curvature of stomach and inferior surface of liver. So first thing, it is a two or double layered folding, unlike the greater omentum. Fold of the peritoneum, and this is between the inferior surface of liver and the lesser curvature of stomach. So first, if we draw our stomach over here, this is a stomach with the starting of duodenum, and then we have our liver, which has to be drawn. Okay, so liver and rough. This is apparent, ligaments present here. Okay. Come all the way here. And then we have a gallbladder over here. And then similarly, here too we have the few ligamentous attachment thingy. Okay. Fine. Now the most important part is the duct system over here. We have the portal vein. Okay. The dark green color of the bile duct and the red color of our hepatic artery. Okay. Anything else that is missing right now? Yeah, we have the arteries that come here and anastomos as well. So first thing, we have this whole structure, lesser omentum, which is a double fold of the peritoneum. It's present between the inferior surface of liver and the lesser curvature of stomach. So if we talk about the attachments superiorly, first thing. So first, if we have our superior attachments, it's very simple. First thing, these attachments only, nothing much. Number 1 and number 2. So the first attachment which we have is an inverted L-shaped matter. So it's in an inverted L shape, which is basically the margins of fissures for two ligaments. So one is for ligamentum venosum, ligamentum hepatis, ligamentum porta hepatis, and the other one is here for ligamentum venosum. So first we have, you can just simplify this a little more easier. These are the margin for fissures of ligamentum porta hepatis and ligamentum venosum. Okay, superiorly these are the attachments near the inferior surface of liver, and then here we have the superior surface, and now we have the inferior surface. So firstly we have the right side of abdominal esophagus, and then we have the lesser curvature of stomach, and the third part we have is our first 2 centimeter of duodenum. Okay, so we have right side of abdominal esophagus, lesser curvature of stomach, and our first 2 centimeters of duodenum. This whole part is stomach, and this whole part is our duodenum. Okay, and the other thing we have to take care of here is our liver. This is our liver, this is bile duct, this is hepatic artery, and this is portal vein. Very important. This is our left gastric artery, and this is our right gastric artery. This is our 2 ligaments, which is between gastro-hepatic ligament, and here we'll have hepatogastric ligament, and here we have hepatoduodenal ligament. Okay, because it's associated between the liver, stomach, and duodenum. Okay, if we would visualize where lesser omentum is in the main diagram, here it's between the liver and the stomach's lesser curvature and the liver's inferior surface. So this is where we find our lesser omentum, somewhere over here. Okay, so this is all about our lesser omentum's attachments superiorly and inferiorly. Okay, and then we have even discussed the parts of it. So it's between the stomach and liver, which is the hepatogastric, and between the duodenum and liver, which is our hepatoduodenal ligament. Okay, now we have the right free margin of lesser omentum. This is also our right free margin. So this right free margin of lesser omentum, its anterior layers and posterior layers are continuous. So this basically forms the anterior boundary of our epiploic foramen, which we'll be discussing later on. Okay, so this is all about the introduction, the diagram, the attachments and parts. Now we'll come to the contents of it. So we'll be discussing about the contents of lesser omentum. This can be divided into 2 aspects. One is near the lesser curvature of stomach, and the second thing is near the right free margin of lesser omentum. So in the lesser curvature of stomach, we simply have the left gastric nerve, in the right and left gastric vessels with their lymph nodes associated. Whereas for the right free margin, we have a trick, which is BP low, send help. Okay, BP low, send help. So for B we have blood vessels where we have our for B we have bile duct, which can be known as bile duct, and then for P we have portal vein. For L we have lymphatics and lymph nodes. S we have the sympathetic fibers, which is basically autonomic, and H we have is our hepatic artery. Okay, now the arrangement of bile duct, portal vein and hepatic artery is important. So first thing, we'll have a portal vein, which is always behind. Then we have our bile duct somewhere over here, and then after that we have our hepatic artery. So our bile duct and hepatic artery are always anterior with respect to this, and our bile duct is always towards the right. This is right to hepatic artery. Okay, it's towards the right side, but in the diagrams it will be appear to be towards the left side. So this is all about lesser omentum. We have discussed its contents, its diagram, its attachments, parts, and everything else. Now we'll be discussing about the next topic, which would be the right posterior intraperitoneal space, which is basically our hepatorenal pouch or our Morrison's pouch, which we'll be discussing right now. Since we have completed our lesser omentum and greater omentum, we will be starting with the hepatorenal pouch, which is also known as Morrison pouch. Okay, and this is basically located in the right side posterior in the intraperitoneal space. So it is in the posterior side and right side. So basically, as the name suggests, it is between the posterior inferior surface of liver and kidney. So it's in the front of the kidney, between the posterior inferior surface of the liver. So we'll start off by drawing the diagram of liver. Yeah, so we have our liver here, and then after that we have our right kidney. God, it can't be this red. Okay, somewhere over here. This will be our right kidney. Then we have the small intestines that pass by, which will be our hepatic flexure towards the right side, and then we have the transverse colon. So now we have the peritoneum that covers like this. This is the whole covering. So we have the liver, we have the right kidney. This would be our hepatic flexure of the large intestine, and this one would be our transverse colon. Okay, so this thing is our right posterior intraperitoneal space, which is known as our hepatorenal pouch. This will be our right anterior intraperitoneal space. Okay, this is all about our hepatorenal pouch seen in sagittal section. Okay, and there's the small area that we'll be discussing about. So first thing we'll be discussing about the boundaries since we have a diagram done. We'll be discussing the anterior, posterior, above and below. So anterior to this we'll definitely have the posterior inferior, the visceral surface of liver. Posteriorly we have the peritoneum covering the upper pole of kidney and diaphragm. Peritoneum covering upper pole of kidney and diaphragm. Above we have the posterior inferior layer of the coronary ligament. So this coronary ligament is basically associated with liver, nothing to worry. And below we have the transverse colon and mesocolon. Transverse colon and mesocolon. Okay. So below we have the transverse colon, mesocolon. Upper we have the posterior inferior surface of the coronary ligaments. Anteriorly we have the posterior inferior surface of the liver. And posteriorly we have the peritoneum that covers the right kidney and diaphragm. Okay. Now we'll be talking about the communications of the hepatorenal pouch. So first thing, it communicates with the foramen, epiploic foramen. It communicates with the lesser sac via the foramen epiploicum. So first thing, towards the left side, okay, in the left side, it communicates with the lesser sac via the epiploic foramen. Lesser sac, which is also known as omental bursa. I don't know how this communication takes place between the hepatorenal pouch and lesser sac. And second thing is near the sharp inferior border of liver. So near the sharp inferior border of liver, it communicates with the right anterior intraperitoneal compartment. So near the sharp inferior border of liver, first we have the right posterior interperitoneal space, which would communicate with the right anterior interperitoneal space. Okay, this happens near the sharp border of the liver. Okay, so we have discussed about where is it generally present, the boundaries, the communication, and our diagram, okay, of the hepatorenal pouch. Okay, this is actually right subhepatic. It's below the hepatic in the right side. It can be also considered subdiaphragmatic. Okay, so this is all about the hepatorenal pouch, which is also known as our Morrison's pouch. Okay, so till now we have discussed our greater omentum, lesser omentum, hepatorenal pouch. Now we will be discussing about our lesser sac, which is also known as our omental bursa, which is present in the left posterior intraperitoneal space. So this is our left subhepatic. Our right subhepatic is formed by hepatorenal pouch, whereas our left lesser sac, left subhepatic, is formed by our omental bursa. Okay, so omental bursa is the diverticulum, la 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 la. Okay, so this lesser sac, greater sac is present in front of the stomach, so this will be behind the stomach, and it's basically the diverticulum of the peritoneal cavity. Basically all the pouches are the diverticulum of peritoneal cavity. And the third thing is it communicates with the greater sac via epiploic foramen. Okay, this is very important, which is also known as the foramen of Winslow, which basically acts as a communication channel between the lesser sac and the greater sac. So we'll be drawing the diagram first, which is very easy because we have the liver diagram reference. from the beginning. So first we have is our liver, simple, and then we have our stomach. Okay, then here somewhere we have our transverse colon, and then in yellow color somewhere around here we should be having our pancreas. Okay, transverse colon, pancreas, and we basically have our peritoneum here. Okay, we have the liver, we have the stomach. It'll go down like this, come back, have the transverse colon covered, cover the pancreas, and then we'll have the third part of duodenum here. Okay, and then obviously we have our lesser sac to be drawn here, which goes all the way down here and here, all of this thing. So this whole blue thing is our lesser sac. Okay, so first we have the liver, stomach, transverse colon and pancreas, and this is our lesser sac. Alright, so liver and stomach के बीच में we have our lesser omentum. This whole part is the greater omentum because these are the anterior two layers. Then we have the posterior two layers of greater omentum. We have the lesser omentum as well between the posterior inferior surface and the lesser curvature of stomach. We have the pancreas, we have the transverse colon, and then we have here our third part of duodenum. I don't know if it is important or not as well. So this is our sagittal section. Now we'll be looking into the transverse section. Okay, so first we'll be drawing our vertebrae. Which is our T12 vertebrae. Okay, so first we have our T12 vertebrae, and then we have our kidney this side, so this is towards the right side, kidney and spleen, kidney, spleen, we have the aorta, then we have the inferior vena cava. So right in front of the vertebrae, first we'll draw the aorta and inferior vena cava, then we'll give the outline of the lesser sac, something like this. Okay, then we'll draw our porta hepatis. So inferior vena cava, we have the portal vein, then we have the bile duct, and then we have the hepatic artery. So we have this whole peritoneal layer that would come right now. We have the stomach somewhere over here. So the stomach is basically present in the left side. So this is all about the left side, and this is all about the right side. Okay, and then it just comes all the way like this, covers the spleen, goes into the kidney like this. Okay, so first thing we have is the narrowing of epiploic foramen. This is our inferior vena cava, this is our aorta, this is at the T12, remember. This would be our kidney, to be specific left kidney. This will be our stomach and spleen. Okay, this will be our porta hepatis, portal vein, bile duct and hepatic artery. Alright, so this is all about our transverse section of lesser sac. and here we have the ligaments that would divide the stomach with spleen, which is our gastrosplenic ligament, and spleen with kidney, which is known as lino renal ligament. Gastrosplenic ligament, here spleen takes the word renal ligament. Okay, so now we'll be discussing the boundaries of our lesser sac. After all these diagrams, we definitely have to make out the boundaries, hopefully a little easier. Okay, so for the boundaries, first we have the anterior wall. In the anterior wall, we'll have the caudate process of liver. It's with respect to this diagram. Caudate process of liver, lesser omentum, posterior inferior surface of stomach, and anterior 2 layers of greater omentum. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Caudate process of liver, lesser omentum, posterior inferior surface of stomach, and then we have the anterior 2 layers of greater omentum. Okay, it's very simple. It's basically with respect to this diagram. Now we have the posterior wall, which is also self-explanatory from this diagram. We have the 2 posterior layers of greater omentum and the structures of stomach bed except spleen. So first thing, we have the posterior 2 layers of greater omentum, and then we have the stomach bed organs, apparently stomach bed except spleen. So this exception is very important. Okay, if this is the stomach and then whatever organs present here are the stomach bed, okay, the thing which separates the stomach bed from the stomach is our lesser sac, but the thing that separates spleen from stomach is our greater sac, which is with help of the gastrosplenic ligament and the iliorenal ligament. Okay, this is to be important. Now to see the structures that make the stomach bed, because we don't know them, it is given as a mnemonic in the stomach chapter. So basically the structures which form the stomach bed on the posterior abdominal wall is basically given by a mnemonic. Dr. S3 kills patients mercilessly. So first we have the diaphragm from the D. It's basically the left crus of diaphragm. And then S3, where we have 3 things: splenic, suprarenal, splenic flexure. So we have the splenic flexure, suprarenal gland, and then we have the splenic artery. So first we have splenic artery, splenic flexure, and the suprarenal gland, and then we have K for kidney, P for pancreas, and M for mesocolon. Okay, the splenic flexure is also known as left colic flexure. Okay, left kidney, left suprarenal gland, and left colic flexure. So this is all associated in the left side because the stomach is also towards the left side, and the only thing which is not present is our spleen, which wouldn't be here. Okay, because all the structures forming stomach bed except of spleen are separated through lesser sac, and the stomach and the spleen are separated by the greater sac of peritoneum. Okay, so this is very important. Dr. S3 kills patients mercilessly, where we have diaphragm, left crus, splenic renal artery, splenic artery, suprarenal gland, splenic renal artery, splenic flexure, kidney, pancreas, and mesocolon, transverse mesocolon, and colon, whatever. Okay, so this is basically the boundaries, the anterior and posterior wall of lesser sac. Now they are saying there are few recesses present for our sac, which we will be taking. They've even given another diagram here where they've given some bottle kind of a thing where we have our epiploic foramen, our lesser sac, which is our omental bursa. Above we have our superior recess, splenic recess, and inferior recess. So the recesses formed by the lesser sac, first inferior, superior, third one is splenic. Okay, so the splenic is basically between the gastrosplenic ligament and the linorenal ligament. That's very simple for the splenic recesses. And in the superior part we have, it's between the lesser omentum and liver. So this is present between lesser omentum and liver. Okay, and the inferior one is present between the anterior to and posterior to. So this is between anterior to and posterior to layers. So this is the greater omentum, basically our inferior recesses, superior between the lesser omentum and liver, and splenic near the greater gastrosplenic ligament and linorenal ligament. The space is present between them. So this is all about our lesser sac, where we have discussed about our recesses, boundaries, introduction, and our diagram, whichever is required for our topic of lesser sac. After this, we have discussed the diagrams, the boundaries, okay, and the recesses. Now after this we will be discussing about our foramen epiploicum and retrouterine pouch in the next few minutes. So till now we have discussed about the greater omentum, lesser omentum, hepatorenal pouch, lesser sac, foramen epiploicum, and rectouterine pouch, which we will be discussing right now. So first we will be starting off with foramen epiploicum right now. So we have our foramen epiploicum. This is also known as foramen of Winslow, or you can simply call it epiploic foramen. It's a simple vertical slit, nothing confusing. It's a vertical slit that helps us to communicate between the lesser sac and the greater sac. So it is present for the communication of the lesser sac, which is known as our omental bursa, with the greater sac. Okay, and its location is very important, which is behind the right free margin, of lesser omentum at the T12 vertebra level. Okay, at the T12 vertebra level, behind the right free margin of lesser omentum. Okay, so now we'll discuss how it is actually present in the human body. So first we'll have our inferior vena cava. Okay, then we have our portal vein, then we'll have our bile duct apparently, then we have our hepatic artery, then we have T12 vertebral level, Then we have something, our right suprarenal gland, which is our right adrenal gland. Then we have here our caudate process of the liver. Okay, something like this, which would cover a good amount of area. This would form something else. And then here below this we have our parts. So first thing we have over this diagram is T12 vertebrae. This is our right suprarenal gland, which is also known as our right adrenal gland. This is inferior vena cava. This whole thing is our omental bursa. This is our porta hepatis. So this basically is the right free margin of the lesser omentum. This is the caudate process of the caudate lobe of liver. Okay, this is the first part of duodenum. So now if we will be discussing about the boundaries right now, we have the anterior, posterior, superior and inferior. So anteriorly we have the right free margin of the lesser omentum, which would contain our portal vein, hepatic artery and bile duct. And we have to remember that these two are anterior to the portal vein and the bile duct is towards the right side of the hepatic artery, which would contain a porta hepatis of bile duct, hepatic artery and portal vein. Posteriorly we have the inferior vena cava, the T12 vertebrae and the right suprarenal gland, which is also known as our adrenal gland. Superiorly we have the caudate process of the caudate lobe of the liver, and inferiorly we have the first part of duodenum. And you see the hepatic artery is folding, so we have the horizontal part of our hepatic artery. So this is all about epiploic foramen. We have discussed its boundaries, what is its function and how is it basically formed. Okay, so this is all about epiploic foramen. And now we will be discussing, last but not the least, about our recto-uterine pouch, which is also known as pouch of Douglas. Pouch of Douglas, which is known as our recto-uterine pouch. Okay, so pouch of Douglas, which is also known as our recto-uterine pouch. So now we'll be discussing about our pouch of Douglas, which is our recto-uterine pouch. So this is basically present between our rectum and uterus. So this is the pouch between rectum and uterus in the pelvic cavity, and it's the most dependent part of pelvic cavity below the pelvic brim. This is in standing position. So first we have to draw the diagram of it, obvious reasons. For our recto-uterine pouch. So it's very simple. First we have our rectum. I think we'll start off with the easy rectum part. Okay, this rectum is very horrible. So we have our rectum first, and then we have our pubic symphysis with few layers. Okay, then we have our rectum, and then here only I think we'll have our you know. Uterus, peduncle for vagina. Here around here only we have a urinary bladder. So this is urinary bladder, uterus, vagina, rectum. Okay. And then we have the peritoneal covering. Good covering. Okay. So first we have is the peritoneum. This is the pubic symphysis. We have the urinary bladder. We have the two ligaments present over here, which would be present like this. This is known as our pubovesicular ligament. Pubovesicular ligament. I think the general term for urinary bladder is vesicle because we had vesico-uterine pouch before. So it's like pubovesical ligament, urinary bladder, and then this is the vestibule of vagina, uterus, rectum, and this part which is present between the rectum and vagina is our recto-uterine pouch. Recto-uterine pouch. This is our recto-uterine pouch, and there's apparently a small bud which is known as our perineal bud. Okay. Fine. So this is known as our perineal body, not perineal bud. Vagina is done, this is done, that is done. Okay. Utrovesicular pouch. This is one more pouch over here. This is our utrovesicular pouch. And then we have two more protrusions over here which will make our urogenital diaphragm. So first we have a